All right, ready for this one?
Yep.
Good. All right, hey, welcome to the father-daughter dance. And this one really takes some coordinated steps because we're going to talk today about grace and consequences and discipline and that kind of thing. And that's really tough for fathers and daughters because dads, you and I have to tread a very tricky little path here. We got to walk a fine line. The fact is that we can't be overly dominant. We can't be overly protective. We can't be harsh with a sweet, sensitive little girl. And yet we can't be permissive with them either, because while they're sweet and wonderful and sensitive, they're also conniving and devious and can get into a lot of trouble. So we have to walk this fine line between making the rules and making them known and not being overbearing and overly dominant. The fine line between having the rules and enforcing them with discipline, but not letting that discipline be harsh and go to a form of abuse. So that fine line, we got to hit this ball right in the fairway, because outside of the fairway, it gets real rough real fast.
And daughters, your dad's job is to protect you, and it's to make you better. And so we have to let him do that job because it's going to benefit us too. And just recognize that he does have a hard job to do. And so we need to be accepting of that. We need to be submissive of that.
All right. So what I think is, and I'm going to speak a little bit in theory here because I didn't always do this really well. But I think there are 3 stages for a dad to move through. One is the stage from the 2-year-old to about a 6 or 7-year-old. And that's when you're trying to teach them that there are rules that have to be followed, right? And so those can be simple rules. Look, we're doing it for their own protection, right? You got to let them know that if you say, stop, don't go in the street, that they stop and don't go in the street. And they know that because they trust your voice enough to both know that you're looking out for them and to know that there's consequences if they don't do what you say. It's a love-fear kind of relationship. And I don't say fear in that, you need to make them scared of you, but you need to be a voice of reason. When you speak, they know there are consequences if you do some things that you shouldn't do. So you don't put your hand up close to the stove, and you don't pet you don't let the cat stay inside when it should, and you do make your bed in the morning before you go to school, and you don't back talk to your mother. And if the rule is on Tuesday, it's your turn to take out the trash, then you take out the trash on Tuesday, and you have these rules that are there primarily to protect, but also to train them on how to follow the rules. So that one is pretty simple. In our family, we spanked. If you didn't obey the rules, we spanked. Now, with the boys, I'd give them a pretty good little wallop so that they felt it. With her, I didn't really want her to feel it that bad, but I still wanted to spank. So I would get out the belt, or I'd get a book, or I'd get something, usually a rolled up piece of paper, just whatever it was, because I didn't want, this is different from the boys too, I didn't want my physical hand touching her in a way that wasn't loving, right? So I never did spank her with my hand. Now I think Mom probably did, I didn't. I was always going to use something. And usually it was a belt, and I knew that I couldn't really give her that look with the belt because it was going to hurt. So I would just give it just enough that she would feel it, and maybe, it just wasn't going to be that bad, really. But it scared the dog out of her, which is all I was after anyway. Mm-hmm. And so, that we just had that rule. So the worst time of all that, you'll remember it, right?
Yes. I remember getting spanked, and I remember the spankings, but I never remember it ever hurting or being a awful experience or anything, you know?
Yeah.
So just kind of what you're saying.
I remember it being an awful experience. It was awful for me. So the one time, you know, go to your room and on your bed and roll over. I'm going to give you a spanking. Well, she wouldn't. No, I'm not going to roll over. She said, Sarah Beth, you're going to get 3 spankings, so roll over. No, I'm not going to roll over. Well, roll over right now. No, I'm not going to roll over. Well, again, I didn't want to be physically harsh with her, so I wouldn't, like the boys, I'd pick them up and roll them over and spank them, right? But I didn't want to do that to her. So roll over. No, I'm not going to do it. If you don't roll over, I'm going to give you 4 spankings instead of 3. No, I'm not going to roll over. Okay, I'm going to give you 5 spankings instead of 3. No, I'm not going to roll. I think we got to 18 or so before she finally did. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I could go to 118. It isn't going to hurt her any worse than if she got 3, because that's just the nature of the beast. The issue was never me wanting to hurt her. It was just teaching her that there's a consequence. And so I gave her 18 spankings with a belt. And before those of you who are worried about, you know, calling Child Protective Services, those 8, I guarantee you, those 18 didn't hurt her. It wasn't about hurting her. It was literally because it was 18, I was going softer than I would have. And I remember getting through with the 18 and standing up and going, oh, that wasn't so bad. And then she went on, and I thought, well, okay, maybe she won that one. Okay, so that's really the early stage. The tougher stage is that middle stage from about age 8 to 14 or so, when spankings really seem a little awkward and odd, and so we just didn't do it. But there still has to be consequences, right? So now we move into the grounding stage, and we did some of that. Grounded you from your phone, grounded you from being able to go places. I don't remember all of, you probably remember some of those even better than I did. But at this point now, it was a lot less about that immediate reaction than it was, okay, you've done something, now you need to be punished. What's the best way to do it? Your phone was a pretty good one, right? Mm-hmm. Took that away a time or two. What else? You remember anything else?
Probably you would ground me from getting on the internet, so getting on MySpace.
Yeah, oh,
so dated now, but yeah, you'd ground me from the internet too.
Internet.
So entertainment was a big thing.
Yeah, couldn't watch TV, couldn't do those kind of things. And I just felt it was my job in a loving way. Now, here's the hard part, dads. From about 8 to 12, she's going through a lot of changes in her body. They're mental, they're psychological, they're physical. And the dad has to keep that relationship. So while I still have to enforce the rules, I now have to change it from any kind of scary. I didn't want to be scary at all during those years. I didn't want to be mean or ugly at all. What I wanted in those years is to get her to start thinking about the consequences of those actions. So you said you were not going to do that. Now I found that you have, so I'm going to have to take your phone away. And I tried to do that through love and just let her recognize that it's just a consequence that we're going to live with things. Now, the easiest part, really, if you get this concept, is from about age 16 up, when you move from consequence into grace. Because in the grace stage, there are very little consequences, but now she's having to deal with her own actions, right? And so it's not me punishing her, it's her punishing herself. And that happened quite a bit, right? Mm-hmm. Remember some of those?
Yeah, I think by the time my dad would have found out that I did something wrong or that I did something I shouldn't have, I already felt bad about it. And I already realized, hey, this is wrong. Is this really what I want to be doing? And so, you know, my dad, he could ground me, but if I really wanted to do whatever I was doing, then I could.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
So it was more on like working on my heart and saying like, okay, who do I want to be? Dad, I've messed up and I realize it, or, you know, him calling me out on it more than me coming to him. But him, you know, him saying, hey, did you do this? And me saying, yes, I did. I realized that was totally
bad.
Wrong.
Yeah. So The one that jumps out the most is the phone call I got on a Saturday morning. She'd had a couple of friends that stayed over Friday night. They spent the night at our house. And Saturday, I get the phone call about, 1 o'clock from one of the dads of the girls who had been at our house. And he said, Mr. Beecham? And I said, yes. And he said, I'm so-and-so. And I said, oh, of course, how are you doing? And he said, fine. Did you know that our daughters were getting drunk at your house last night? I said, no.
No.
I did not know that. And tell me a little bit more. And said, well, there were some boys that were down the way, and they had some alcohol, and so they brought them over, and they dropped them off for your girls, and your girls apparently at your house late at night. And where were you, by the way, and why didn't you stop this? And I said, well, okay, if it's 1 o'clock in the morning, I was asleep, and I didn't know about it. I will thank you for letting me know, and hung up the phone. Then called Sarah Beth and sit her down and say, Sarah Beth, I just got a call from your friend's dad, and he was calling me to tell me about you drinking in our house last night. From that point on, I didn't have to say anything else. I literally didn't have to say a word. She broke down in tears. She was the one that was just heartbroken. She was the one that said, I know we shouldn't have done it, and it's this and that and that. And, okay, what am I going to do? Tell her that it's wrong? She knows that already. My point, my job then was to reinforce for her, yeah, you didn't make a good decision, so next time make a better decision, right? Because isn't that what we want? What we want, even if I were to say, you're grounded for 2 months and this, what I really want is for next time her to think, yeah, this isn't a good idea. And I can ground her to do that, but I run the risk of just pushing her into more of a rebellion. I'll just hide it better next time. Mm-hmm. What I wanted to do was to let her know it isn't right, and you know that, and I think that it's better if you don't do that anymore. And I don't know if she did it anymore or not, but I suspect that she at least thought about it more before she did.
Mm-hmm. And something being in college now that I've learned is a very huge contrast from when I was in high school or middle school, and my friends have talked a lot about this, is just things being in the light versus things being in the darkness. You know, we don't want things to be in the light. We don't want our parents to know about things because then we're called on it and then we're held accountable for it. And so things are always better in the light. We are always going to get better when things are brought to the light. And so, you know, that's something that my friends and I were just so bad about, bringing things into the light, you know, bringing our struggles in, you know, and saying, hey, exposing it, you know, like, hey, this is what I did. And so I think that's something that I could have been so much better about, is just, it's always going to be better, brought into the light. Mm-hmm. And so for daughters, learning that consequences are necessary to help, you know, mold us into being the person that we want to be. When we were talking through this, I brought up, you know, an analogy of braces. You know, our teeth are messed up, and then we get braces, and it fixes them, and it makes them straight. And braces hurt. If you've ever had braces, they put them on, and they tighten them, and they just hurt. But they are necessary for getting our teeth where we want them to be and what we want our teeth to look like. You know, it's braces are a good thing. No one questions, you know, well, I don't want braces because I want my teeth to be crooked. You know, no one thinks that. We all think, you know, like, man, this hurts and this is not enjoyable, but it is necessary. And so, daughters, it is so important that we realize the importance of consequences and realize the importance of these things. And then we submit to our parents' consequences, and we realize that, you know what, like, my parents want what is best for me, and so I understand what they're doing, and I understand that this is coming from a place of love, you know. I think that's the biggest thing, is understanding that following what our parents have to say, and then whenever we mess up, dealing with those consequences is because they have a reason for it. You know, they have purpose in that. And I just wanted to share this verse from Ephesians, it says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your mother and father, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth." And so this verse says, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on earth. It's not for my parents' benefit that they punish me when I mess up. It's for my benefit. It's to help me grow as a person, and it's to help make me embody Christ more, and our fathers, I'm sure you've heard the analogy that our fathers, although imperfect, are an example of what our Heavenly Father looks like. And so our Heavenly Father, sometimes he shows us grace when we mess up and he says, "I love you." And other times there are consequences for our actions. And that's exactly how our fathers are. They love us and they have grace for us, but they say, "I know what is good for you. I've been there. And so this is what I'm going to do." And for you to just trust your Father and say, "You know what? You have more wisdom than me. You've been in these situations before. So I'm going to trust that what you're saying is good. And I'm going to trust that what you have laid out for me is for my benefit so that I may enjoy a long life."
Mm-hmm. When dads can do that in love, then it always works. When dads do that in anger, it never works. God doesn't discipline us because he's an angry God. He disciplines us because sin makes him angry, and out of love, he doesn't want that for us. So, out of love, there's some things that your daughters are going to do that make you mad because you love them so much. That's okay. But when you go to discipline, you can't discipline out of that anger. You've got to discipline out of that loving, nurturing, growing kind of thing.
Yeah, and putting it into perspective too. I will never look back on my time in high school where my parents said, "No, you can't go to this party." Or where my parents said, "You know what, this was wrong. I'm gonna, give you whatever punishment." I'll never look back on that with regret, it was always better for me because they saved me from myself, they saved me from, just making wrong decisions. And so they are essentially saving us from a lot of hurt whenever they do this, the boundaries that they set for us will always be good in hindsight.
Yeah. All right. So when your daughters are young, you got to give them some rules and teach them how to obey rules. And when your daughters are somewhere between 8 and 14 or so, you've got to continue to teach consequence, but we do that in a less physical way. And then when your daughters are 15 to 18 or so, then you've really got to reason them through with what they're doing and why that's wrong. Because anything more than that, you run a huge risk of them moving into a rebellious stage, and you can't take that. Now look, all of that is generally true, and there are outliers to every single situation. But we believe that by and large, if you can handle it in that way, that it will work well for you. You can give your daughters strength and protect them without destroying their will or their love for you. I love you.
Love you too.